Two older brothers went to service in '39, and so he and I were left at home alone. We couldn't handle it all, so we pulled the trees.
You and I know. Okay. That is really a cute picture. That's right. I was
This
looking
is
at
the old
that.
gentleman that came out of Iowa in 1905 and bought 40 acres out here for the Washoe Bench.
And so this is your grandfather?
Yes.
Wow, that's a good picture.
That was about,
I think it says, oh, he lived, I guess,
in
from
the late
1857,
20s. He had
1931.
50 years.
And this is the place that,
My niece is living on right next to
Oh,
Belmont.
the Williams or Wilson place, Williams place. Let's see.
Russell Payne is
Yeah, Russell. But what was the grandparents' name?
Frazier.
Okay, but she called it something
Bought
else.
it in 1905.
Yeah.
But they didn't. When they came out, they bought that place in, it was all sagebrush, and bought a place in Midvale too. And my dad and a brother stayed then in Midvale. It had a house on it, and farmed for 2 years. Granddad went back to Iowa and had a farm sale the next year. And then in '07 he moved everything out on the railroad, all the household properties and the cattle and everything moved out.
and this was in '07.
Mm-hmm. But he had bought the land 2 years before.
And do you know who he bought that land from?
I think it was B.P. Sean.
You thought it was him, huh?
I wouldn't, but I got no proof of that. I do know that we were still in Canyon County at that time.
Right.
And the whole description of the property when my dad finally bought out the rest of the family on the place, they never really said what was in it. You know, who the original owner was.
Well, I did some research on the Shawns, and I'm glad I talked to you because I was calling them the Shawhans. Oh dear. But, and it was interesting. This is what I
Come up with.
gathered on them, yeah. They came out here in 1880 it says they went to Kansas, and then in '95 they came to the Washoe Bench. And he had been a captain in the
Civil War or whatever it was prior.
World War
One?
It must have been.
No, that's
What would it have been?
Because that.
Oh, I've got it
would've
written.
been
Okay, he was former captain of Company K, 9th Regiment, Iowa Cavalry.
like the National Guard, but then they called them cowboys. And my dad, speaking of different things, you've heard about the tragic fire in North Idaho way back years ago. And my dad was in Company I here with Payette National Guard.
Oh, okay.
And he and some of the Fruitland boys they mobilized them to go up and fight fire. Lee Brown, you know Lee Brown, and my dad, and I don't remember who all, maybe Clarence Ficken or some of those guys about the same age, were up North Idaho for quite a while fighting fire.
That was
Because they
one
were
heck
just
of a fire.
Like they're mobilizing the National Guard now and going overseas. And that's what happened to my two older brothers in 38, 39. They belonged to the National Guard. Why did they go and join the Guard? Because they had a meeting quite often every month, and every meeting you went to, you got $1. You know.
Yeah.
And they sent a truck around, picked them all up to New Plymouth now. And if they attended the meetings, but they didn't know it was going to lead into spending 5 years in the South Pacific.
Yeah. Well, the other that I found that he was, said he became a leader in horticulture and with emphasis on the production of pears.
Yeah. That
And-
orchard right there across the
Was a
road.
pear orchard?
Quite a, well, it's hard to estimate, but imagine there's 10, 15, maybe 20 acres of pears.
Huh.
And he had apples and peaches and everything in beside. But pears were the big thing,
Were his thing. And he also sold Studebaker buggies.
I suppose.
Yeah, he was a
I don't
dealer in the
remember that.
Studebaker. And then I found on one of his, this was on a family tree information, a public family tree, that he was killed, he and his wife had driven out, it said 1911. He was 72. They went out of town wherever their orchards were to check the orchards, and on the way back, the horse spooked and took
Wagon.
off, and they got thrown out of the wagon, and he was killed instantly.
Yeah.
And that she got $12 a month because he had been
a soldier.
hmm
Yeah.
But BP was their son, who had a big party, worked for some company where they designed orchards and irrigation systems. Had you heard about that?
No.
Huh.
But I imagine that's how all the water that comes out of the farmer's ditch comes clear on the Washoe bench, and I imagine he had a lot of instruction in that to get it going,
So when did you say your grandparents bought the land from him? Was in 7 or before that?
05.
In 05. Huh.
And we had a land title, but it was a different word they used back then.
Patent.
Abstract.
Abstract
Oh,
title.
Yeah, that's right.
And I
It
remember
showed-
reading that, but it's long gone.
Yeah.
Because then my father had to buy his brothers and sisters out of the estate when they died in 29 and 31, I think it was. And it went on, there was a mortgage on the property, and it went on till the middle 40s before they all agreed that they'd sell, and nobody was doing good, so they agreed to sell, and he got a loan and bought it then from the estate.
So is there still orchards on the place? No.
Not since like about 45 or 6. No, 41 or 2, we pulled them all. I was thinking when I got out of the Army, but this one, just as I was going in, Air Force, why in fact, that picture, my brother, and
This one?
yeah, that's my dad and brother, Bob, out in the field. I took the picture.
So what are they doing here?
The horses go round and round in a circle on this long timber. They just go in a complete circle.
Mm-hmm.
And this drum right here, right there, it winds the cable, pulls the cable. Every time they go around, it puts a lap on the drum of this thing. And it's anchored down low on a tree. And they cut the limbs off up about 4 or 5 feet, and you put the cable over the top of those limbs. By being anchored on the ground, it just tips the tree out, and then they keep winding and drag it out to where you
Oh,
can
that's how they removed the trees.
You just go down 2 rows, and this sled that was on was all mobile. Of course, 2 horses could just move to where they wanted. And they just wind that up. And they didn't have the big machinery that they got now. They just
Yeah.
reach out and pick it up.
Yeah, but sometimes that machinery they've got now doesn't just reach out and pick it up. It's a little harder than that.
And on this, you didn't stand where if the cable snapped, you didn't get hit, too.
Oh.
And,
So your dad was like other dads? The orchard was too much if the boys were leaving home,
Yeah.
so we had to change it.
that's
the way
exactly right.
my dad was with the milk cows and Gerald was with the beef cows. When the kids left home, we changed our way of life. Huh.
But we did have other pictures, but I've got 3 brothers and a sister, and they were all divided up, and I come up short on the end. I was gone most of the time.
Yeah, huh.
I don't know. But even back then, I can't remember seeing any pictures of our equipment other than this one.
That's neat.
And I guess they're probably somewhere, but I haven't found them yet.
Yeah, yeah.
My oldest brother bought them when we finally sold out. All those kids sold over to him, and his daughters may have pictures, but I didn't call them to see.
Mm-hmm.
I know they're busy.
And it's Bob that bought it?
No,
He ended up with it? Who?
Arlen.
Arla.
Art, they call him.
Oh,
Oldest
okay.
brother, Art Frazier. He was a definitely a handicapped person. He had polio when he was 18 months old, and until he was about 18, when Shriners had quit taking him, every summer he had surgery to try to get his ankle straightened up where he could walk on feet. And they did a wonderful job. He was self-supporting but they'll only do it till you're an adult.
Well, I hope that's one disease that never comes back.
Yeah.
Right. Huh. So do you know why? I'm always so curious. I'm curious. I wish now I could talk to my great-grandparents, my grandparents again. Why did anybody ever say why they up and left?
Iowa?
Mm-hmm.
No, but it's a matter, I think, of just kind of like we got now. The property they had in Iowa had increased in values enough that they thought they could make money. They sold out and come out here and bought much cheaper property.
And more.
And their family, there was 3 girls and 3 boys, and so the boys were able to farm with him at that time. My dad was 16 the first time he come out here, and his older brother, who would have been about 18, they lived in Midvale a couple of years and farmed up there, put up hay and stuff so they'd have feed for the cattle when they.
So did they come here, or did they go? Are they like so many that went into Oregon first and came back?
No, they came directly here.
Came here. Did they have friends here or family or?
Not
do
to
you
my
know?
knowledge. But something always attracts them, Even after they got here, I know my dad and one of his brothers went into Texas because they was giving away land there. And they got it. Just like nowadays, if you want to go buy a condo or something, they'll give you a free trip and a free meal or two to get you there,
Yeah.
Well, this was the deal, going to Texas
Huh.
and Oklahoma won the land grants, and they went down on that. But
I read, and I don't have the figures with me, but where the government gave each state like 1 million acres or so many acres of land, if they would come up with an irrigation plan, they could have the land.
well, that's very true. Well, just like how you got irrigation up where you got it now. Later years they did that with the local water, pumping, and that all the development of the price of electricity to pump water higher, had a lot to do with it.
My grandfather homesteaded out there where we live, out in the Black Canyon, New Acres area in, what was it, 8 or 9, something like that, because they promised irrigation water. But he had to leave, and he went to council and was a forest ranger for years because they didn't get the water till 40.
Yeah.
But the water, evidently, from what I gathered, they people on their own built flumes or something that transferred water from the Payette River on the bench. That's why there was fruit on the bench.
And I remember years back when it was still horses, my dad It was a summer or two, he spent a lot of time between Emmett and New Plymouth, fixing the farmers and the other ditch both, you know.
Yeah, it sounds like,
Because there was some money there. Well, if they didn't get it fixed, nobody would have any money. They wouldn't have any
Right.
water. So he spent time, I know, 2 or 3 different summers taking the horses up and slip scrapers, moving dirt, you know, building. I guess they had gophers back then, just like now.
but
Where is the diversion on the farmer's milk?
Well, it comes out of Black Canyon.
Oh, does it?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay.
Black
But-
Canyon Dam out of Emmett.
But they had water before then, though.
but that came out of the Payette River.
Mhm. That's
Yeah.
on the Payette River here.
Yeah.
Evidently, it somewhere east of Fruitland, they could hook into it some way that it came across. Because to me, it looks like the bench is sitting up here above the.
I can't remember of that, but I do remember Payette is diverted right out here on 52, about 6 miles out of Payette, right there at the end of the Higbee Ranch. It used to be Higbee Ranch.
Yeah.
Okay.
And on the other side, Bill Gottschalk had a ranch there, and that's the diversion dam.
Mm.
They got a different setup now. Some of them been talking about it. I haven't ever gone out and watched it, but when they have to raise it up to get more water out, they got now in there a rubber tube, and they just add a little air to the rubber tube, and it goes up. And
Oh, I've heard about that, yeah.
I guess it's really working very efficiently.
Uh-huh.
Where they used to put in coffer dams and they'd rot away and this sort of thing, you know.
What's a coffer dam?
It's a diversion dam, meaning it just diverts the water.
Oh.
Maybe drive piling and put in lumber, you know, so
Huh.
it's just like you said, a diversion dam. Coffer dam is the same thing.
And it was made of wood, and that's why it
Yeah.
rotted away.
And concrete, and sometimes they get a flash flood by the water come too fast, they hit it and blow it out. They had one of these rainstorms we had come down to the gullies right there where you go out 52 and finally get down on the flat. That first place there that used to belong to Bivens, there's a gully washer come out of there this spring and put
Oh,
boulders clear across the highway out there.
oh my gosh.
Just like you read about what happens back east when they
Yeah.
get so many inches of, well, you never knew that how much water fell out here in these hills, but it all went into one canyon, come right out that place and went right down through each cornfield, put about a foot of mud on each cornfield.
And what rain you get here isn't necessarily what you
What
get.
you get up there.
Yeah.
So there's no record how many inches fell there, and just quick enough to create a gully washer. Where the city in Ontario, you see it every night, how much they know how much they measure, keep records, you know. No, they cleared that place out there on Marshall Bench out of sagebrush, and there's only about, I guess 2/3 of it was an orchard of the 40 acres.
Is that right?
We had 10 acres of open land down below. And now that's, in buying and selling, why they split it in half, so to speak, and now there's 3 houses out on the back end of the place that have bought land there. It's a pretty good view of the railroad track and the Snake River and Ontario. A lot of people like that.
Yeah. Huh.
Now, Bob's place, was that part of the original place?
No, not as far as we're concerned. There's always a 20-acre strip between where Royston and Bill Royston and Tobe Royston lived. But prior to that, that was owned by the Garmans, who had 2 or 3 other places around. And the older Garmans, the age of my grandparents, her name was Newt and Lenny. They were Ralph Garman's parents. Now the only descendant is Walter out here now, and he's pretty well pulled all his orchard too.
Yeah.
And now he got He still got plums or prunes and a small block right at the end of Warshall there, before you go down the hill into Warshall. But there was 20 acres between that property and our own place. And it finally was owned by 2 or 3 different people all the time we were growing up. And when it finally come up for sale again, my brother Bob bought it. 22 acres, I think it is, legally. And they put it all in prunes, Italian prunes. And did well for a few years, but just like everything else. Like buying Jonathan or whatever, or apple you like, you know. And, I know Fuji come in with the Japanese apple, and everybody liked it real good.
Yeah.
So they pull them, or else get them to grow in the, I can't say the word where they graft it on and make new varieties.
Well, we watched them, stopped and watched them out their Hinglers out south of town, and they were doing what they were calling budding, because they were just putting the bud on the tree.
I know years back, when I was with the chamber here in Payette, we went out there on a bus trip once in the Hinglers, and they had wrapped it enough that they were changing the designation of the brand, and I can't remember what they were changing to. But we had raised white, we called them Arkansas Black, and Wine Sap,
Right.
Rome Beauty, and Jonathan.
And delicious.
Oh, those standard delicious are still my favorite, but you can't find any.
No, I know. And they're got that bitter, not bitter, snappy feeling when you bite into them.
Yeah.
To me, a yellow or a green apple is not an apple. It should be red. Because Mother always said, don't eat green apples.
Yeah.
And so I still don't eat green.
Now, the Arkansas Black, was that a prune or an apple?
Apple.
That was an apple. Was it really, really a dark one then?
Mm-hmm. Pretty black.
Near black, yeah.
And they were hard, weren't
Yeah, real.
they? Yeah, so when you bit into
Kinda
Kind of
like
like
wine
biting
sap?
a green apple. You know, they were kind of that.
Huh. Were they
And they-
bitter? Sour?
No.
Huh.
but they were small. Corn that you plant it and then because you plant an orchard and it doesn't produce this year. And then pulling it out is a horrendous amount of work.
They used to say, when I was a kid, I remember them saying, an orchardist can expect one good crop out of 7 years. 1 out of 7 years. Is that, I mean, I don't know how you could survive. Does that just mean a really good crop, not
Yeah.
just any?
But I know it went on from bad, well, even 7 years. We'd have never made it in 7 years, you know. For that
Well, yeah,
This
if you
one
had some.
gentleman that had, and he owned the property right next to us, and he had foreman out there doing work. And of course, back in those days, we worked for him, and he come over and worked for us, you know, and stuff. And it's a good neighborhood out there. He also had property on the Oregon slope.
Well, they think it's hard times now. They don't know what hard times were.
And we always, you know, we lived without money, you might say,
Yeah.
to an extent, because we had milk cows, and we had grass horses,
Chickens.
and we had gardens, and chickens,
Mm-hmm.
and goats, and everything a kid could find.
Right.
In the spring of the year, we'd go up here on Willow Creek, and they'd give you bum lambs, you know. We always had lambs around here.
You know, we all grew up without money. The kids now, I don't know what they would think was happening to them if there's no money. You know,
It's a tough situation. There are a lot of kids that, you know, don't have money. They go to other places thinking they'll get a job, and they can't get a job.
not gonna find it.
And they get in trouble being lose their
So
way
now-
of thinking, you know.
When you were spraying, we've heard so many different things about the spraying. Were they using a tank sprayer then? Because we've also heard about some that had piped it from the barn and had long hoses that they
Yeah.
sprayed.
Where Walter Garman lives out there, I think the piping is still in the ground where he looked at
Oh,
it.
really?
And it was at that time the fellow that owned it, can't think of their name now, but he was a engineer on the railroad and out of Ontario. He run, I think, to Burns that way. But anyway, he apparently had enough money to put in metal pipes all over there. We had a 300 gallon with a Model A Ford engine on it for the pump and the pressure and stuff and mixer. And we would just pull up to a ditch and lay the hose in there and pull it out of the water out of the ditch and go out and spray. And of course, when you're working out of a ditch, a lot of times, we spend a lot of time, the filter wasn't working right, and we'd get plugged up. But that was my job. I pulled up to a lot of ditches and put in 300 gallon of water, and we could go for quite a ways. They were both on about 50-foot hoses, one on, we'd take 2 rows at a time and go down.
Somebody on each hose and
My 2 brothers,
spraying each other as they were going.
Bob and Jim. I was up on
And
it.
you know, they talk about the dangers of that spray. You look pretty healthy to me.
And I got sprayed many times with arsenate of lead
Yeah,
and whatever else we were using in those days.
yeah. Jack Graham talks about,
Sulfur.
yeah.
And,
Jack Graham talks about starting it when he was about 6 years old. He just celebrated his 95th birthday. Looks pretty healthy to me.
I actually think it may be, how do you know these things? My oldest brother, who had more than I had of it through the years, he was 12 years older than I am. And later years, he had lots of trouble with asthma and stuff, see, so he something could have been wrong to begin with. But
And how much of that was due to polio?
yeah, that's what you don't know, what causes
Uh-huh.
what. And
Yeah. Well, and our
even
bodies
when
are
later years, in his 40s and 50s, had a family and he was working out on the Oregon coast, heavy equipment in the forest, you know. And the doctors said, you shouldn't be in this country because of the growth on the pine trees or fir trees or whatever trees.
And the mold.
The mold that was getting him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when he come back and he finally finagled a deal with the Federal Land Bank and bought the place. And that was good because it was all open ground and he had 20, 30 head of cattle he could run on the back end of it. And, but still, he was troubled with asthma, and that's what got him. He was taking the guy out on the hill to buy some of his cattle and didn't make it back to the house. No. It's all because of his chest situation.
But I know the people who have polio back then now are having lots of trouble with polio syndrome again. Not necessarily the way it was then, but it doesn't get out of the body. It still affects them years later, and the doctors don't even know what to do with it because all the doctors that treated polio are gone.
Dr. Paxton, do you remember that name? Dr. Paxton lived right out on the corner. We lived just an eighth of a mile north of Buckingham Packing Shed, Engler's Packing Shed, where Carl Meal lives there, new house. Well, prior to that, it was a 2-story house, and that's where I was born.
Is that
Oh, really?
right? So you weren't always over here on the bench?
No, not till I was 5 years old. And that's when my dad finally got the estate settled and they moved down. 29.
Really?
Okay, but what about Dr. Paxton? I remember that name.
He was the doctor that was with took care of my mother when my sister came and when I came. And yeah, my older brother said he came in that black box, you know. Me, meaning me. But anyway, he was a very good doctor. Neighbor, you know, right there. I can't think who was on the corner there now, but everything changes over time. And,
It was before on this north side of Hingler Packing?
yes, on the west side of the road.
Gist lives right in there.
No,
He's
up
the
a
next
little ways.
block.
Yeah.
He's the next.
On the
Yeah.
west side of the
Mile
Yes,
or
I
half
don't.
mile.
Yeah.
That's right. So I don't know who it is.
Carl Mio lives there now.
Do you remember anything being there at Buckingham besides the shed?
No.
Was that the Keller place? Can't remember which.
Come to maybe Garget people that owned it
What was
at
it?
that time.
Garvit?
Garget. The way I remember my dad saying.
Garvit.
I'd say Garget, something like that. Garget place.
And that's where this Dr. Paxton lived.
Yeah. No, he lived up the next place.
Oh, the next
north,
place.
On the crossroads there.
Well, we found where before Fruitland, before they made the town in Fruitland, they considered, because they had some things out at Buckingham, they considered making the city there.
Mhm.
But since there was already a little grocery store and some stuff in, they moved it
Back
into.
in.
Yeah, that's what we read.
I've heard, I don't know how true it is, that when the railroad went through, they give land to people, you know, to build on. So they start a city or a town, you know, and that give them more business. And I'm sure that the same way here, kind of like they're doing after they take the rails out now and make bike trails out of them. So same idea. The land was given to the railroad by, you might say, given to put a train in there. So they giving it back now.
Did your dad own land out there? And did
Thanks
he?
to the Federal Land Bank. He
Yeah, the
was
Federal Land
on the
Bank.
board
Was-
out of Spokane.
Well, that's got to be a good thing. Did he have orchard out there?
Yeah, till 1940, middle 40s.
So what?
41 or 2 he had, but then he had all the trees out.
Yeah. So what? Okay. So that's where you lived with this picture when he was pulling the trees.
Yeah,
But your grandparents were over here on the bench, right? Up on it
we moved from Buckingham in 29.
in '29. Huh.
Of course, he'd been taking care of it for 2 or 3 years because my grandmother's gone and he'd been sick. And I had an aunt in New Plymouth, and she helped take care of Grandpa, but they kind of take him back and forth.
I have a newspaper clipping of when Lois and Russell bought your grandparents'
Yeah,
place.
her and another niece, Art's daughter, they kind of got together and wrote a history of it.
Yeah, the picture of the house and the history of the place. And, yeah,
But so I'm really kind of confused. But when your grandparents came, they
Originally bought the
were
place,
on the bench. Okay.
but as times got tough, they had to finance it.
I
you
s-
know.
oh. What about the? What were they doing to? Why do I have trouble with this every time I want to ask? Heat the orchards.
What?
Heat the
oh,
orchards.
it's smudge pots.
Smudge
pot.
pots. What kind of smudge pots? Did you guys do much smudging?
No, never did. But I'm sure Bob did, my brother, on the prunes, because they come on and blossom a little earlier than apples.
Right.
But it was just a case of let's hope it don't freeze.
I see.
Because But that was after the wars, after 45 when I come home. About in the late 40s, that's when they started smudge potting
I see.
and everything.
Before that, I read where a lot of times they just built little bonfires to the
Yeah,
orchard.
if there's a little breeze.
But it kind of depends on where you live, whether you need it or not,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Very good. It's just like right now, right? We got friends that live out there around where the Hogue Orchards used to be, and the orchards are all around out north of here. And some of them got froze out and some of them didn't.
Yeah.
It gets them during the blossom time.
I suppose before the war, there wasn't the oil for the smudge pots, was there? Yeah. So it was just by chance.
Yeah.
You cross your fingers and...
That you could heat it up enough with it. Because there's a slight breeze sometimes, depending on the valley. But I can tell it up this draw that I'm on right back here. You'll get a good breeze, maybe all night, but you won't have it on the south at all.
Did your grandparents come out on a train?
Yes.
They came on a train.
With their household goods on half and cattle and stuff on the other train.
My great-grandparents, my
And they
grandpa.
unloaded right down here in Payette.
And that's something, because, of course, mine came out in the late 70s, and they came on the wagon train.
Mm-hmm.
But it really wasn't that much longer that people were coming out on the train.
My dad talks about, this would have been 1905, 6, 7, long in there. That him and his brother were staying at that place up in Midvale, and sometimes they'd come to Payette. And he said, we've even gone to the dances in Payette, and it'd be maybe 12, 1 o'clock, and so they'd go get the horse and buggy and turn him loose. And they'd sleep all the way to Midvale.
You can't do that in a
Old horse
car.
would take 'em home. But he also said some guys would louse them up because they'd put a gate across they'd go out the ditch bank here, go to Weezer and then go up. But if they fenced off the ditch bank, that stopped him right there. He said that some morning we woke up and the horse was standing there just in front of the gate.
Shoot.
Because they, when you need pasture for your cattle, you're going to take advantage of a weed patch and then let them onto the ditch banks,
Did you have did more of your family, like your grandparents, did they have brothers and sisters that came out too? Or did
Not
they
to
leave
my
family
knowledge.
behind?
No, one of them went into Washington later, and one in North Idaho, Cammy Idaho,
yeah.
lived up there, one brother. And two of his sisters went into Washington, around Spokane area, in later years. And one sister was married to a gentleman, and he was an insurance man over in Nampa. But they lived right out here on the place till they were of age, my dad was 16 when he come out, and the girls were older than, one of them's younger, but two of them were older. So they'd be 18, 20, something. The other two brothers were in there,
Yeah.
18, 20, somewhere in there. I can't remember exactly. Knew at one time, but
What were your grandparents' names?
Samuel Riley Frazier, and Elvira Jane Frazier.
And were they born in the States?
Yes. In Tennessee, I think. Memphis area. They had the old boy that come over from Scotland. We got the whole thing but figured out due to my one niece that went into the Mormon church. She's done, in fact, she even went to Europe and checking out where Thomas J. Frazier came from.
Huh.
And couldn't find it because he probably was booted out.
Oh.
But he went from New York and he landed and come into Ellis Island, I guess, what she found out, and was able to have enough money. He finally moved to Tennessee and got property somehow. We don't know how that was. But it shows in county records in Memphis, Tennessee, that he had 39 slaves.
Is that right?
And at the end of the Civil War, he turned them all loose. Yeah. And so my nieces have figured out that if your master was good to the people, they'd take his name.
Right.
And so that's why we got the Frazier name in a lot of blacks.
Yeah.
That's the word of these two nieces that figured
Yeah,
it
that's
out.
what I've heard too. There's a lot of, yeah, that's what we've heard too. We see.
Mara, could you turn that off just a minute? I want to, this has nothing to do with what I want to ask him. The grandfather changed his name. He wasn't really who he said he
Thought it
was.
was, yeah. But
That
anyway,
could be.
the government gave him 800 acres for some reason, maybe something he had done in the service of the country or whatever. But he had 2 wives and then involved into, I think it was 12 or 13 family members, you know, stepbrothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
So he gave them each 100 acres, I understood, when he passed away. And I don't know whether my grandpa, when selling that property, came out with money. Apparently had enough money to buy the land.
Right.
And
Must not have been terribly expensive to load everything on the boxcar and come out.
I
They did
imagine
a lot of
it's
it.
pretty cheap to get people to move west, you know. I'm assuming that.
Now, did they ride in the boxcar too? Because I know some of them did, and they set up their bed, and they had a little stove that they cooked on, and it was just like a rolling home.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember if my dad ever said that or not, or my aunts. I really had one aunt I was real fond of, and she told me a lot of stories about her and the neighbor girls used to go out and put flowers on Francis Payette's grave. You know. They thought he was buried out there on that bluff across from the old ice house out there.
Oh, that is such
But,
a sad cemetery.
Over the years, they've done a lot of land leveling out there, and they have people have been kind of watching what goes on, but they always get away and say, well, those are cattle bones, they're not people bones. But I do remember when I was going to Washoe School, and there's quite a lot of talk about where they put the road up over the bluff there from Kenny Supply and on up on that back road, that WPA boys dug up a grave. It was wrapped in leather blankets and stuff. But the county was good enough, they took care of it. They figured it Indian graves, so they put them out on Riverside.
Oh, for goodness
And they
sakes.
lowered the road and taken it away, and they found the graves. But there is a graveyard right there.
I know, and it's been so vandalized.
Yeah. People have stole most of the headstones.
Oh, you know,
I don't know, they might have, you know, why would you steal a headstone?
I don't
Unless
know.
you matched your name or something.
Yeah.
I can see that. But
I just hope when they're in the ground, somebody comes up and
steals their headstone.
yeah, kicks their headstone or something.
Do you know, happen to know, now Connie tells me it's pronounced Effie, E-I-F-F-E, where that sighting is?
Ivy.
Ivy is what you say?
That's what I've heard all my life.
Well, yeah, and her dad was a railroad man, so she thought Ivy makes more sense to me, but she thought
But I believe it is EIFF.
it is EIFFE. Do you know where that's at?
I'll think about that a little bit.
She said she'd come home by way of Washoe a while back, and she saw that, and she can't remember where he saw it, and we've traveled around and followed, and we haven't found it yet.
I don't know.
I
I've
thought-
heard it all my life, I'll say that, but
And Ivy is
I
what.
was thinking it was between Payette and Fruitland somewhere, you know, there used to be one right up here at the top of the hill, there where the trailer courts are and that stuff.
Well, that's kind of what's one spot we haven't got into there yet.
I don't think the Ivy is, generally there's a siding,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, it's
an extra line there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that, you know,
that was
Oh.
kind of an interesting story. Did you ever hear about them? Did you know anything about those people?
Ivy.
Mm-hmm. Evidently
I've
he
heard the
came.
name all my life, you know. But
Evidently he came in about 92, I think.
my
and-
first thought maybe it might be
92.
just fairly north of Payette, but I don't know. There's 2 or 3 different sightings between here and Weiser.
It has to be close to Fruitland because when they went from Payette Valley Railroad and the Oregon Short Line bought, and they were redoing the tracks.
Kayaks,
They brought in cars with men and supplies and stuff. Some of them were parked at Fruitland, some of them at Buckingham, and some of them at this Ivy.
Ivy. Well, that's what I've heard.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's one corner we haven't found yet.
I'll do some more. I had a guy come up down Mel and I drank coffee down in Means the other day, and the guy come up to me and said, "You're the oldest guy around here I know." He said, "What was there before that bridge was put in that they're tearing down?"
Yeah.
Well, it went in 27.
As far as I know, there wasn't anything there. Before that, it was over at Washoe. The bridge, from what I've read.
Was it a bridge or just a ferry?
Well, I think they talked about the only way, where did I read that? The only way to get from Fruitland to Payette was to go through Washoe. So, I don't know.
My dad tells me about when he was a kid, after they started living out there, that some springs, the water would get deep enough going in on that Washoe Road that it'd swim a horse.
Oh,
You know,
my
it went down
gosh.
on horseback, you know. And sometimes it'd come up high enough that it would swim a horse.
So,
The railroad was holding it up, spring of the year, you know. Just like when we had those freeze back in the late 40s, early 50s, you know, they had to dynamite them away from or Payette had got flooded there, so ice jams under the railroad bridges.
so maybe there really wasn't much of a bridge. It was,
That's what I don't know. Somebody said, I went on the internet, but I'm going to have my daughter do it, see what Idaho Transportation says. You know, maybe there's history there. Somebody will know the history, I'm sure.
when I read about, they had an ice plant out there, and all the ice thousands upon thousands, I can't remember how many, stored for the,
They got it out of Washoe Slough.
they couldn't do it now, it doesn't get cold enough.
They cut ice out there.
Yeah.
Well, and there and again, I used to ride a horse a lot and playing with kids when we was 10, 12, 14 years old. That Washoe Slough, right off that ice house, it would swim a horse. It was low enough, high enough, or whatever you want to say, but the horse would swim.
My
Of
dad,
course, when my dad found out about it, that ended that whole he got stuck in the mud too,
my dad and the Grahams talk about ice skating on the Payette. Daddy lived up at, out of New Plymouth. And they'd skate to Payette. Anytime I ever saw it frozen, you couldn't have skated on it because you had the blocks that were every which way.
Yeah.
But they used to skate on it and have a great time.
I was working a couple of jobs back in the, I'm pretty sure the late 40s, when we had bad weather, 48, 49 on it. And the county was out, there's a Washoe Bridge going right there before the bridge, and trying to break up the ice land, and Lochner and out of Fruitland, and I don't know, Johnson, Art Johnson out of Fruitland were running the county road and bridge, and they was afraid it's going to back up and take out that. So they were throwing dynamite out there, and blasting a little bit. I got to throw dynamite a time or two. You know,
Well, you wouldn't be able to do that today.
no, they'd probably shoot it now, you know, with a big gun. But they did open it up, so the water was flowing. That's all they wanted, you know. Even back then, it's kind of like when we was pulling stumps all those years. Somebody out of Fruitland and Plymouth come down and mix the stuff for my dad. And it's just like the Oklahoma City bombing. We was using commercial fertilizer back then. For the black powder starter or something, you know, for blowing, and we could split them, you know, really blow them water. But the fellas that knew what they was doing would come and pack it, put it in there, and with a fuse, and we'd just get back. And then make them small enough you could handle it easier. You know. Even after you take the trees off, the trunks are way too heavy, you know, and well, even then they was probably 18, 20 years old with the trees, you know, so they're pretty heavy.
Guess then you've got all those roots and.
I remember we also found out my dad, we had quite a few hogs one year, and so he fenced off quite an area and let the hogs go in there, you know, get the weeds down and stuff, get them down and make it easier to drag hoses and stuff. But I guess they were lacking something in their diet, and they started ripping the bark off the trees.
Oh.
We had to move them out of there. They, you know, they get the taste. What is it? Salt they want or something? I don't know. But they went to chew on the stump of the tree. They could just hook their tooth in, and rip a piece off, and chew it.
I thought maybe you were going to say they would root the ground and get
Well, that too, but maybe that's how they got started getting the bark that they liked.
Oh.
Or maybe there's something we were spraying on there that they wanted, you know, or liked or something.
Huh. Well, you know, my folks had a few trees, just our own family fruit orchard, and we just had farmland, but there's a whole different ballgame growing fruit.
Okay. And I don't know, I've had a son up in Seattle for the last 20 years, and we go up visiting him and gone through Yakima area, Sunnyside and all that. And now I think there's pretty near as many acres of grapes as there is apples even in there.
Yeah.
And, which I guess it's a successful venture. I see we got one right out here south of Plymouth, so to speak.
Oregon, Idaho, and Washington are becoming as good winemakers as, in fact, some of them I think are better than California.
We just came back from Ellensburg yesterday, and as we were coming out of the town, and you look up there on all those hills south of town, they are all covered with orchards there at Ellensburg, orchards and vineyards.
That's been for years. Isn't that a beautiful valley?
Oh,
It
it
is.
is. It is. But it can be so cold there. But yeah, it is. Our son has what's he got, about 13 acres, I think, out kind of
East.
out, yeah, east of town. And kind of it's all river bottom there.
Yeah.
It's all river bottom. I think this is kind of scary, but
Rich soil, generally.
oh yeah, it really is. Yeah. But I was so amazed at all the orchards on the hillside there. And Yakima's just unreal. That whole valley is just both sides. Sunnyside, Grangeville. Granger, isn't it?
When I was a kid growing up, there was a apple dryer right there where you go in the cut and wash your bench, right between the road and the graveyard. And my mother worked there. I think it was 15 cents an hour sometimes in the fall of the year, drying apples. F.H. Hogue Company run that dryer for a lot of years there.
And that was just up here.
Just on the west side of the road going up there.
Well, Franklin Eldridge, you know Franklin?
Mm-hmm.
He sent me a picture of a fruit dryer, apple dryer, that he said was just, as he remembered it, from Fruitland, like you're going to go out to Whitney Bottom. Do you remember one out there?
No.
He said that that's where he remembered it was, and he sent me a picture of it, and but I can't find anybody else.
It says, no, remembers that.
I should have brought that picture to show you, but I didn't.
I went through Washoe School, grade school, 7 years, and
Don't have any pictures of that school, do you?
just of the kids.
Just of the kids.
And what would have been, I was going into 4th grade, and I was about 35, 1935 or 36 probably. And so many people had moved in to Jap Camp or wherever they could set up a tent in the Washoe area there. The teacher moved me up, said, you go up to 5th grade, they got a desk up there. And another kid that was going to school with me, his name was Richard Gline. And I never did go up to 4th grade.
Oh, for goodness sakes.
That put me in Fruitland High School, actually too young, back then. This other fellow, Richard Gline, his mother was a school teacher. And she said, Dick, you're not ready to go into high school. You take the 8th grade again, which he did.
Oh, for goodness sakes.
But I went ahead and went out. I got out of school when I was 16, see. And, didn't know what I wanted to do, other than be a farmer.
You probably wouldn't have known if you'd have been 18 either.
No. But anyway, it's funny how those things develop. And this kid, about 10 days ago, I got an email from him. He lives in Utah, the same Richard Lyon. He says, we're going to be in Ontario. My son's taking me on a trip. And it's kind of a self-story all. He was a single mother, He was adopted by his mother and raised him, and he went on. When he was in high school, he started delivering Western Union telegrams when we had Western Union.
Yeah.
And he worked all that time, and then he went into Nevada and went to work I don't know if it was Las Vegas or what town. But anyway, he retired from Western Union.
Oh, for goodness sake. How
And he's been
interesting.
down in Utah ever since. He married a girl, a Mormon girl. They've been volunteering in the church, just like all of them do,
Yeah.
And he called me, and we went to dinner, and his son took him on. And he didn't do it when his adopted mother was alive. She asked him not to, but he did look up the other family members. The parents, one of them had died, and some of the other parts of the family took them. I don't know why she didn't want him to know. who he
Well,
was.
some adoptive mothers are really bad that way. I know some of them very well.
So it's,
I have.
he honored her wishes. That's all.
Yeah. One of my sisters adopted a boy, and she feels that way. And do you remember Hardy Thompson, that used to be the Methodist minister at Fruitland years ago?
The name Thompson, yes, rings a bell.
Hope and Hardy, and our daughter married their son. Both of their boys were adopted, and she told the kids that it would hurt her feelings really bad if they ever wanted to know. And I think, and so David found out because it just really bugged him. But Dan he would know, and sometimes I think he would really be better off if he knew the true story and knew that everything was okay, other than having this stirred up inside of him wondering. But not as long as she's alive. Nope.
They really need to know the health background.
Yeah,
Yes.
and they've been told so many different stories. He doesn't know which one's true, and so I think sometimes the truth would feel good, but maybe it wouldn't. I always think maybe a third or fourth party needs to check it out and see if it really would be. But
I've over the years acquainted with two other friends that we've had for years, and they were in the same situation in Payette here. They both got moved up to 5th grade. They, they didn't have enough desks, so they'd move up to where there were desks.
Instead of bringing the desk down here.
So did this guy? Did he go to Fruitland to school then, or did he go to Payette?
He went to Payette.
Did you have a choice out there?
Well, at that time, Washoe District was a pretty rich district, and they paid tuition wherever I wanted to go.
Oh.
I'd had to walk to Payette, which is probably, a mile and a half or 2 miles. And I could walk up the corner about a half mile away. There's the Fruitland Brook.
So why was Washoe School District a rich school district?
Railroad,
Oh.
right side of the railroad, that's what they
Okay.
told me, I don't know.
He went to, this friend he's talking about went to grade school all his years with Kenny and graduated with me.
Oh, for goodness sakes.
But I couldn't, it's just whatever the person wants in the way of adoption, I guess. But he was real happy to find out that he did have brothers and sisters.
Oh, yeah, he had more family.
But they had all been adopted out too, but somehow they
Yeah.
got together. I guess inquiries probably lead to,
Well, it's easier now than it was in the 40s or the 30s because then you probably never ever found out. But now it's easier.
well, I think, like she said, it gets to a time you might want to know some of your medical history,
That's
or-
right.
And I think that when you put a child up for adoption, every bit of the medical history that you know of should go with that child.
Very true.
Yeah.
So how many were in your family? There was
4 boys and 1 girl.
just one girl.
We each had a sister.
Yeah. Where was she in the mix?
Number 4 from being the oldest. I'm number 5. She's just 2 years older
You were
than
the
I am.
baby.
And they're gone now. I
Is
can't
that
even
right?
ask them. They know.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I remember when my mother was alive, every once in a while she would say, I don't have anybody I can ask anymore. They're all gone. Or her brother was quite a bit younger than Mother. And now, every once in a while, I come up with something I'd like to ask, but
No.
there's nobody I can ask.
That's right.
And it just hits you all of a sudden. There's nobody I can ask, and yet, but you didn't think of asking while they were alive.
You went into the service. Were you drafted or did you go?
No, I volunteered in the
Did you?
Army Air Corps.
And what did you do?
I went to Randolph Field in San Antonio, Texas to become a pilot. And 3 years later, they changed over to training foreign pilots like Chinese and stuff.
Really?
And I was with a group of about 200 of us there waiting to go to pilot training. 43, 44, 45.
And they were training foreign people
Foreign.
instead of,
I didn't never heard that before.
I didn't either. Because if you didn't have any oxygen at all, you'd,
Yeah, well, that's why we were staying low, is because the oxygen is there.
but the pilots, the other pilots,
If they get too high,
uh-huh.
they don't go up above that if they don't have oxygen.
Okay, and you guys that they were testing, they didn't take all the oxygen
No,
away.
no, no,
Oh.
no, no.
He's still here.
Well, I know, and he sounds
His
okay,
brain is functioning.
but I wondered about some of the others. Yeah.
I do know that you can really get the bends, they call it.
And I didn't know that you could do, I knew that in diving, but I didn't know that in above water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Huh.
And the same thing in flight suits, you know, electricity and stuff, getting shot, if the plane gets shot up and they're up too high, well, on oxygen. Clifford Horn, remember him? Fruitland
Yeah.
boy.
Yeah.
You know, he had to bail out when it was too cold. And
Oh, really?
The rest of his life he had trouble with his legs because both of them
Oh.
got froze his feet.
Oh.
And it didn't really stop him till later in life, but,
Huh.
which was fine, but that's what brought it on, was because it bailed out too high. But what you got to bail out.
Yeah. It's either that or,
I know I have a question for you. This is different. Were you around the ages, or do you know the Schubert boys, Gerald, Harold, and, well, the other family, Edna Schubert's, the school teacher's sons?
Not really. See, I was in Washington, they're up there. I knew a lot of the kids,
You
but
knew, was Lyle about your?
yeah, he was pretty close, a year or two, I think, from me.
Yeah, see, my
Maybe.
oldest sister married Arlen, but
Some of them I didn't even know, Orland
Yeah.
was one of them. But,
younger. Well, Jack Graham had told us that Ray Schubert had a motorcycle, that he had gotten out of service on the East Coast and bought a motorcycle and rode it across the states in about 20. And then he had given that motorcycle to these two nephews who were going to make a motorboat, take the motor out and put it on a boat on the Payette River. They got the motorcycle taken apart, but never got the boat.
Finished.
You know, so I'd like to hear the rest of that story. So did you ever get out of the States then? Did you have to go overseas? Well, that was probably
went
good.
into Mexico a time or two on a 3-day pass, just to go down there,
Oh,
Paso, and see what's down there, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But no, just, we had a staff sergeant that was in charge of our group, and he liked to fish, and I liked to fish, so I, you know, weekends, and he'd take a bunch of us fishing, you know. We did have generally 2 hours of close order drill and 2 hours of calisthenics, and then we'd play sports, you know, so, and unless we had an assignment to go to do something else, but they were keeping us in shape, was what they were doing.
Yeah.
did you have, where you target practice and things like that?
Yeah,
Okay.
expert rifleman and all
Uh-huh,
those good things.
uh-huh.
Were you learning to fly an airplane at all?
No.
Just,
No, and you go to pre-flight, and then you go to primary, and then to basic, and then secondary. You know, there's 3 or 4 stages, and we're all full, so we just sit there and waiting our turn.
for goodness sake.
If the guys, some of the guys, see, I was just barely 18, and some of the guys were 22, 23, 4 years old. They took them, I
Oh,
don't know, why, but
because they were older. Huh.
Us younger guys, I guess they would just keep till you get that old and then we'll train them.
Do you know how they came about placing you in that? Did you apply for it? Did you have to test like?
Yes, yeah.
So skipping that grade didn't hurt you at all then?
No. Being from a poor family, next year after high school, I went up to, they had a deal going with the government to train you to do something, radio training or whatever, this type of thing, electricity, that sort of thing. So they paid me $75 a month to go up to Spokane to go to school. So I was up there a year.
I see.
That time I was either going to get drafted or volunteer. So I volunteered, and first I was going into the Navy Air Corps. And I went over to Seattle and didn't pass the physical. My heart wouldn't return to normal, they said. And after jumping up and down how many times, and they sent me home. And about a month or two later, they sent me another ticket, come back to Seattle. So I would go back, same thing. And so I come home and run into Stan Fretwell, there's that name, and
Oh, yeah.
kid by the name out north of town here. And we go to Boise to join the Air Force, Army Air Corps then. And Russ and I made it, but Stan didn't make the physical. He couldn't get in. And he never did get in. His physical, he couldn't pass it for some reason. I don't know, they had a large stars or what, I can't remember now. And the other kid went to California, and I got my orders. I went to first Hillfield, Ogden, Utah, and then down into Texas. And one of my good friends, he was returning. He'd been overseas and flew, I forget how many missions. So he took a hold of me and took me down to, he was going back after being home on vacation, leave. He was still in the service flyer. Ed Dalton family.
Okay, yeah.
He come out of Colonel a few years later.
Yeah.
But we just happened to get on the same train. He knew my brothers. We all went through Fruitland. He was about the age of my older brothers. And so it was fun.
Well, that's good.
I was saying going out to Alamogordo, the planes were bringing in wounded soldiers from the South Pacific, and they had the planes and the stretchers in them, and empty. You could get on them and go somewhere, and then catch another flight back. And so I went to Alamogordo, got a flight to go on one to go to Denver. Well, between there, they got new orders, and so we pulled in to Garden City, Kansas, and this other kid and I got booted. couldn't go any farther. They were putting something on the airplane that we couldn't go with them anymore. So we went out and hit the road, and stood there for about 4 hours hitchhiking to get out of Garden. And by gosh, a good farmer, cattleman, said, if you boys will ride in the truck, you can go. Where you going? We said Denver, and he said, so am I.
Oh, for goodness sakes.
And
wow.
Back then, they'd pick up soldiers,
Yeah.
So I get to Denver, and give it up. I bought a bus ticket. I couldn't get out of Denver either. I was afraid it might happen again, like Garden City.
Do you remember when you were a kid, the trains in Fruitland and between the small towns? Did anybody ride those trains, use them like that, or were they mostly just freight?
I suppose they could have in the caboose, because I'll think of the two guys, a guy by the name of Whalen and the two guys that run it for all those years. And anyway, they knew everybody. And I'm sure that they'd let their friends ride and shoot pheasants along the right of way. And those sort of things.
But really wasn't any passenger
No,
service.
I didn't know of it.
Yeah.
But they might
Well, I
have.
have read where, yes, they did buy a ticket and they rode the caboose from here to Boise or, you know.
It's kind of like you can go up now to Horseshoe Bend and Cascade and have those trips. And White and I've done that. And you can, he'd reason us, well, he wanted to go three of them to try, and we came from Horseshoe Bend to Emmett, but we didn't come clear to Emmett on a dinner train, see. And we come down about to Black Canyon Dam, and then they just reversed and went back. And during that time, you served dinner and see all the area around. And the same way from Cascade down, we've done that one too.
It's worth the trip. We've never done that.
It's kind of interesting to
Is
see
it?
a view rather than a highway,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Of course, people on the river, they like to shock the people on the train. They moon you sometimes.
Okay.
But you're way up in there looking down there in the river, so.
I never understood that.
Yeah, you can figure some redneck kids.
Well,
Some idiots.
Yeah.
those guys that you went to school with, I just remember hearing, you guys must have had a lot of fun when you were going to school there at Fruitland.
Well, we had some fun people.
That's what I think. That why the Payette girls liked
That
him?
must have been.
They, I don't know, just there's a good
Just a fun bunch.
camaraderie, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah, yeah.
But now,
My class of 41 was not that fun-loving. George Strange and George and I were in the same class.
Well, did George ever get excited about anything?
Kind of,
Yeah, so I understand what you're saying.
but some of the things that you guys did then, if the kids did it now, they'd be in jail.
yeah.
Well,
And you know, it wasn't that it was that bad what you did.
It was just ordinary.
remember.
Yeah.
You remember Richard Tisch?
Yeah, I was in school with him.
He was my mom's cousin.
No kidding. He
Yeah,
went on and became a teacher.
yeah, yeah.
Isn't he the one that made the pins, Kenny?
Uh-huh.
I got a pin,
Oh,
Idaho pin.
oh yes, yes. I'd forgotten about those. I've got one too.
Yeah.
Yeah, he used to tell about putting the cow in the high school building.
I've heard of that. Had a lot of wagons on the front steps. And stuff
Yeah,
like that.
stuff like that.
Model T
Yeah.
Ford up on top.
They had orderliness too. I know a guy by the name of teacher by the name of Ellerson, and they got married in the first year, and he was an ag teacher. Well, some of the older guys would let's chivalry them. So they get into Fruitland and go up the door and try to get them out, and they wouldn't come out. They didn't want to be chivalried. So somebody goes up on the roof and puts some gunny sacks in and smoke them out, you know.
Oh,
Just created a lot of mess. They resigned and left.
Oh! Might have been easier to just come out.
I wish they could never figure out why, but they wouldn't do it. They're just going to make him holler down the main street in a wheelbarrow.
yeah.
I guess that's when two stubborns meet.
Oh, goodness.
Lots of fun stories. Lots of fun. Well,
Dick Goodman, remember him?
oh gosh, yes.
He's been around for years over Meridian area, Boise, Meridian.
Yeah.
Hey,
His mom, I tell you, when she was around 85 or 86 or so when, I don't remember, but I'd stop every Sunday and take her into church with me. Then we started going, we went grocery shopping and go shopping together and stuff, you know. She'd wear me out. And I'd have to say, you know, can we just sit down for a little bit, Millie? She said, I can't remember ever being tired a day in my life. She said she had an overabundance of iron. And she said, I have never been tired. I don't even know what it feels like.
Oh my gosh. And she was how old?
Oh, she was up in her 80s.
Oh my goodness.
I must
Yeah.
not have a drop of iron.